Okay, continuing from the previous session, let's get started with some more concepts from object-oriented programming. Now, today the first concept that we'll be discussing is the initialize method that we have in the classes in Python. Now, what exactly are these methods? Let's understand the purpose first, and then we'll talk about how exactly do we go about writing this one. Now, I'll just go back to Spider and let's first try and recollect what were the kind of programs that we were discussing last time. Now, this is again a simple object-oriented program that we've seen. Now, over here, what we had done was we had created a class like this called data. It has two variables A and B. We have two methods. One is display and display one. Then what I do is I can create an object of class data, and then I can just using this object, I can call whatever the methods that I want, right? So D over here is an object of class data. And now when I run this program, this is how I'm going to get my output. So this is what we've been doing. We said कि object oriented programming में eventually तीन चीजें होती है. क्या तीन चीजें होती है? First, you create a class. Second, you create an object. And third, using that object, you invoke all the methods belonging to that class. So that is how object-oriented programming works. Now, over here, now just observe this. I've written two methods. एक का नाम है display and the other one is called as display one, right? Now, what happens is it's not just enough that I've written the methods. अब अगर मान लीजिए if I just remove these methods, मैं method को call करता ही नहीं हूँ. And now if I run my program, please look at the output. Now when I run my program, I see nothing in my output. आप देखेंगे मेरे output में कुछ भी नहीं आया है. See, the reason is it's not enough or it's not sufficient that you just write the methods inside that class. Unless you call those methods will not get executed. Now this is the most basic point in functions or methods, and that is जब तक आप किसी भी method को call नहीं करते हो, it will not get executed. Unless invoked, the methods will never get executed. Is this understood? Right. But now, what if I want certain things to be done before the user can call any given method? अब मान लीजिए मैंने display method call किया, मैंने display one method call किया, and so on. अब एक simple सा example देता हूँ. Suppose ये जो variables है, say A and C, right? Suppose I remove these statements. अभी मैंने निकाल दिया. Now observe this over here. I'm planning to call say display function. I'm planning to call display one function and so on. मेरे को ये functions को call करना है. तो आप देखेंगे display function is display function is displaying A and display one function is displaying C. Now I want to call these methods, right? So मैंने क्या किया है मालूम है? यहाँ से methods को call किया है. Now when I run this program, if you see, it's generating an error. Now, why is this generating an error? See, because yahan par I have used A and C in these methods, say display and display one, but I haven't created A and C anywhere. Now, there's nothing wrong with the method display and display one, but just that, usme jo variables hum log use kar rahe hain na, those variables have not been created, or you can say that those variables do not exist. So now this program will start generating an error for me. So there are a lot of times there are certain parts of our code which we need to execute before you can do anything else in the program. So over here, now to this particular class called data, I'm now going to add a method which will get executed on its own. And those methods in Python are initialize methods. All those who've done programming before, there was something called as constructors. This is nothing but constructors in Python. Others, don't bother what constructors are, just listen. So initialize method kya hai? Initialize method is one of those methods which will get executed before any other statement in the program, right? Before any other statement in the class. Now observe this, how exactly am I going to use this? See, in the same program, what I do now is, please observe, okay, I'll take this entire program. Now when I go here, see this. Now look at the difference in the two programs. In the first program, I've created this class called data. In the second program, I've created this class called calculate sum. Okay. Now observe over here, I've created this variables a and b, and I've initialized them to say 1 and 2. Now over here, I'm using this initialize method to assign value 5 to a and assign value 12 to b. And then there is a display method. Then I've created this object called calculate sum over here. Right, I think. Okay. Calculate sum over here, and I'm now invoking this method. Now I'll execute only this program. Now when I execute this program, see, observe this, the value of a is 5 and b is 12. Now what exactly has happened out here? See, when I started executing this program, or when I started executing this class, C is equal to calculate sum. I've created an object of this particular class, calculate sum. Now what happens is when I create this object, what it will do is it will create this variable C. An object will have everything that the definition of the class provides. इसके अंदर a का value है 1, a और b का value है यहाँ पर, a का value 1 हो गया और b का value 2 हो गया. ये 1 और 2 क्यों हो गया? Because that is what we've created over here. But what happens is when I create this object, this method initialize will get executed automatically. यानी जैसे यहां पर देखिए हम लोगों को डिस्प्ले को या कोई भी मेथड को कॉल करना पड़ता है, I'm not required to invoke this method explicitly. The moment I create an object, it gets executed automatically. So as soon as I created this object, this statement got executed. A, which was 1, has now been overwritten with 5. B, which was 2, has now been overwritten with this value 12. So later on, when I call this display method, यहाँ से ये display method को जब मैं call करता हूँ, and when I'm displaying A and B, I get values 5 and 12. So this method that you see, this initialize method, is a constructor which gets executed automatically. So कभी भी यहाँ पर if you want to ensure that this is something that has to happen before you invoke any method belonging to the class, you'll write all that code inside initialize method. So initialize method is the only method which gets invoked by default. Now when does this initialize method get executed, or when does a constructor get executed? Always remember, the initialize method will always execute the moment an object is created for the class in which it is defined. ठीक है? See यहाँ पर if you see ये जो method है initialize method, ये कब एग्जीक्यूट होगा? See generally हमने किसी भी मेथड के बारे में क्या बोला? Any given method will get executed only when it is invoked. उसको कॉल किया तो एग्जीक्यूट होगा, नहीं तो नहीं होगा. But when does a constructor get executed, or when does an initialize method get executed? Very important point this one. We are not required to invoke it. It will get executed automatically. When I say automatically, what does it mean? Whenever I create the object of this class, calculate sum. See this initialize method is inside this class called calculate sum. Now when I create this object C is equal to calculate sum, this is where I'm creating this object. वो जाके इसको execute कर देगा. अब इसके बाद if you call this display method, then I'll have no issues over here. ठीक है? Now observe this. Going back to this program. Now over here, if you see A and B were not defined. So in such cases, what I'll do is I'll write define, initialize, and then self, right? Then what I do is, see, you could read the values from the user and all also, doesn't make a difference. So suppose if I write self dot A is equal to say 9 and self dot B is equal to 14, something like this, right? Okay. If I write like this, now observe, now when I run this code.
So in the print you have given self dot C. That's why I guess.
Yes, this is B. No, but it will give us A also. See. Yes. Now it should work fine. Now observe. Now it should work fine. So whenever you add an initialize method, it will always execute, it will always get executed by default. You are not required to invoke it. So this is what is the role of an initialize method, right? We'll just type this quickly, get the outputs, and then we continue. Let's now get to another very popular, very important concept that we have in object-oriented programming, and that is inheritance. Now over here, let us try and understand what exactly is inheritance in Python. Now, let's get the idea of inheritance first. See, the best part is the concept of inheritance remains exactly the same in any programming language that you study. Obviously, the code, the way we write the syntax, that is what is going to change in Python. But what exactly is inheritance? Now, please, what is the object-oriented programming that we have seen so far, or how exactly have we been programming? Now, observe this, please. See, हम लोग क्या करते थे अभी तक? We were always creating, say, a class. Say I have this class called data. It has some variables, say A and B. It has some method called display. एक हमने class बनाया, एक हमने object ये class बना दी. Then what we did is हम ये class data का object बनाते थे, say D करके, and d.display करके then we were invoking everything from this particular class. So simplest form में object oriented programming क्या था? एक class बनाओ, एक object बनाओ और object लेकर class के सारे methods को invoke करो. This is what we have done, right? Also एक और चीज, suppose in my program there is another class. Say there is this class, say, called compute. Now I have some data, say X in this class. There is, say, a method that I've defined called read, right? In this method, right? In this class. And say I create an object, say C, for this class compute. So what I can do is C.read. I can write C.read. I can get the data like this. हाँ, लेकिन आप अगर मेरे को बोलेंगे कि ये C के मदद से ये डिस्प्ले को कॉल करो, C.display, no, this is not happening. Always remember, एक क्लास का ऑब्जेक्ट सिर्फ अपने ही क्लास के सारे डेटा को एक्सेस कर सकता है. तो C can access only the data belonging to class compute, whereas D will access only the data belonging to class data. एक ऑब्जेक्ट सिर्फ अपने ही क्लास के सारे डेटा को एक्सेप्ट कर सकता है, ये एक्सेस कर सकता है. So that is what it is. But now suppose my requirement is such in the program कि ये जो second class हमने बनाई है compute, this class also needs this A and B and this class also needs this display method. यानी ये जो compute method है, इसको class data में जो भी values है या जो भी data और functions है, उसकी जरूरत है. अब क्या करेंगे? See, one way is that you go ahead and you create this data again. Now, create the data again मतलब जैसे अपन ने यहाँ पर बनाया है, मेरे को यहाँ पर भी A और B बनाना पड़ेगा. The way I had written the display method over here, over there in the class data, मेरे को यहाँ पर भी display करना पड़ेगा. यानी सेम डेटा मेरे को दो बार बनाना पड़ेगा, सेम मेथड मेरे को दो बार लिखना पड़ेगा. तो अब यहां पर I needed read display method in two different classes, so I'm thinking of writing it twice, or maybe if I need these variables A and B in this class compute, I'm thinking of creating them again. Now the issue is, please understand this carefully. Over here, it is not always possible, or it is never advisable that something that you need in a class, you create it and you need the same thing again in some other class, then you recreate it. वापस से उसको दोबारा बनाओ. It doesn't make sense, or that is something which should not be done. So what do I do in such a case? See, so far, if you see, what I've done is I have created these classes, but I have treated them as independent entities. Rather than doing that, what I'm going to now do is I'm now going to connect these two classes. Matlab, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this class data and I'm going to treat this as a base class. From this base class, I'm going to create a derived class called compute. यानी सीधा सीधा what I'm going to do now is I'm now going to link both these classes. So मैं class data में से class compute बनाऊंगा. So I'm going to derive this class compute out of class data. This is what I'm planning to do. Now, what is the advantage of doing something like this? Now, when I connect these two classes like this, if I treat data as a base class and derived and compute as a derived class, then whatever data I have in the base class, I need not rewrite it inside compute, but virtually they get inherited to this derived class as well. यानी मेरे को दोबारा a और b और display method लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है, but you can say virtually they are as good as members of this class compute. So now if you use this compute का object, say C, it can not only access read, it can also access display method. So if you see, C is an object of class compute and it is also accessing the data belonging to the base class data, right? So whenever I have the object of one class inherit the data for some other class, then that is what is called as inheritance. तो inheritance में फायदा क्या है? Reusability of code. आपने base class में जो data बना दिया उसको आप बेस क्लास में तो यूज कर ही सकते हो, बट विदाउट रीराइटिंग दैट पर्टिकुलर डेटा आई विल बी एबल टू यूज देम इन डिराइव क्लास एज वेल. सो दैट इज व्हाट इज inheritance in programming. Now, talking of inheritance, now again, keep things very simple. So the beauty of all these concepts is they are very powerful, they are extremely useful, and they are very, very, very simple to work with. तो कोई अगर मेरे से पूछे कि भाई इवेंचुअली इनहेरिटेंस में होता क्या है? सी, इनहेरिटेंस इज ऑल अबाउट वन, I create a base class. Two, I derive a class out of this base class. I call this as the derived class. Then using the object of the derived class, I can access everything belonging to the base class as well as the derived class. So entire inheritance can actually be summed up into these steps. What are the steps? One, create a base class. Two, create a derived class. Three, using the object of the derived class, you access the methods or the data belonging to the base class as well as the derived class. So this is what is called as inheritance, right? So what we do is when we write programs now, there are a lot of codes available to us which have been given to us by the developers. What we do is we just derive from them और उसमें से हम अपनी class बना लेते हैं. तो जो पहले से बना बनाया है, I need not sit down and write those codes again. Now, there are different kinds of inheritances that we have. The first one that I just discussed is the most basic one, which is called as single inheritance. So, इसमें क्या होता है? From a single base class, I create a single derived class. This is called as single inheritance. Then I have something called as hierarchical inheritance. Now, what do you mean by hierarchical inheritance? आपके पास एक base class होगा, इसमें से I have created इसमें से I've created this first base class, then I can create another base class, then I can create any number of base classes like this, sorry, any number of derived classes like this. So एक class में से I can create multiple derived classes. Now that is what is your hierarchical inheritance. Now the advantage here is if I have say variable X or some data X which is in this base class, I can use it in all these derived classes. मैं तीन जगह पर और उसको use कर सकता हूँ without having to rewrite that particular code, right? Then you have something called as multi-level inheritance. So what we do is I have a base class. From this, I create a derived class. From this derived class, I create another derived class. This process of deriving a class from another derived class is what is called as multi-level inheritance. Now, suppose if I have data, say A here, I have this data B here, I have this data C here. This is my class number 1, this is my class number 2, this is my class number 3. Okay, so in class number 1 I can access this data A which I have created within that particular class, right? But understand, because class 2 is derived from class 1 का जो data था वो यहाँ पर आ गया inherit होके. So in class 2 I can actually use both A and B. Now in class 3, which I have derived from class 2, I have B as well as A. So what I can do is, if I create an object, say X of class 3, I will be able to access all this data. So these are the different kinds of inheritances that I can use, and this will help me in reusing the code. मैं base class का data derived class में use कर सकता हूँ. But vice versa is not true. Huh? Now look at the single inheritance. Say suppose if there is this object, say X, which belongs to the base class, and there is this object Y which is for the derived class. अभी इसमें data है A. इसमें data है B derived class में. Now A inherit होके B में आ गया. Sorry, A inherit okay, ये second class में आ गया. Now if Y is accessing, it can access both A and B. Derived class का जो object है, sorry. Y can access both A and B, but आप बोलोगे X में से A और B दोनों access करके बताओ. No, that is not happening. The derived class का object can access base class का data, but base class का object cannot access derived class का data. To keep things simple, what is inheritance? एक base class बनाएंगे, एक derived class बनाएंगे, and derived class का object will access the data belonging to both the base class and the derived class. Now what I'll just give you the importance or the advantages of where do we use this, say, practically, something which is used exhaustively. See, suppose if I go to a site like, say, Amazon, or if I go to a site like, say, Flipkart and so on. Now suppose if I'm planning to buy anything, they give me the description of that particular product. Now suppose if I go to the, say, novel section. Now novel section mein, there are so many novels, and say every novel has the description about the book as well as the author. Now suppose there is some author A. Now this fellow has written, say, 5 books. This is novel 1, this is novel 2, this is novel 3, this is novel 4, this is novel 5, right? Now these are 5 different books. So this is his book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, book 5. Now, if I want to buy book 3, and if I go to the page, it will give me the details of this book 3, and also it will give me the details of the author. But understand, if the same author has written these 5 books, in that case, the Amazon will be required to record that particular information 5 times. Now you can imagine the amount of data that Amazon already has, and over and above that, if I'm required to repeat the same data, if I'm required to create the duplicate of that data, say 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, so practically it becomes humongous amounts of data. And ऐसा नहीं है कि unique है, it is repetitive ना. Also, if the information is about the same author, doesn't my information remain the same? जब same information आपको 5 जगह चाहिए, why are you even thinking of creating it 5 times? Rather, say, what I'll do is I'll create another class called author. I'll create this class called author like this, right? Then what I'll do is I'll just have all author ka information over here. And then what I'll do is I'll inherit this class 1 from class author. तो book का जो information है वो तो आप यहाँ लिखोगे ही, लेकिन author का जो भी information है, it gets inherited directly over here. The same information gets inherited over here. The same information gets inherited here. The same information gets inherited here. The same information gets inherited here. So I'm not required to rewrite that particular data or rewrite that particular code ever again. Now that is what is the advantage of inheritance. See, also always remember, practical programming, we should never ever create data duplication. That should not happen, because it will create chaos when it comes to managing the data. So this is what we are going to do. Now I'm going to demonstrate this with the help of a program. Now just look at this. कैसे ये program आएगा? Now in this program, I've created this class called base class, right? See, ऐसा नहीं कि इसका नाम base class होना चाहिए. Over here we've used the name base class. It could have been anything, right? Something like this. इसके अंदर I've initialized a string called name, which is blank as of now. I've initialized this variable age to 0. Then there is this read method, which reads name for you, which reads age for you. So this is what your class base class is all about. Now from this class, I'm going to create another class called derived class, right? Naam kuch bhi ho sakta tha. Now over here I've created class derived class. But now how do I connect them? Now this is my base class. Isme se I want to create this derived class. So how do I connect them? All I need to do is class derived class, and from whichever the class I want to inherit, I just need to write the name over here. So this is your base class. So over here I've derived this class from this class base class. अच्छा, इसके अंदर I've written just one string, which is address, which is initialized to blank, and your read one method is initialized to and your read one method is written, which will read only address. ठीक है? And now I have written a display method, which is displaying name, age, and address. This is what we've done. So I've written a base class, I've written a derived class. Now just look at the derived class, just look at what has been, whatever you find in red over here. Now just observe this carefully. See, over here in this class, I have only used one variable, which is address. Okay? But if you look, the display method is using name, display method is using age, and then address. चलो अगर ये display method, if it is accessing address, तो बात समझ में आती है that method, that variable belongs to the same class. But in this class, I haven't created variables name and age at all. तो फिर वो कैसे use कर सकता है? Generally speaking, I cannot use anything which has not been defined in that particular class. No, not possible. But this will work because of inheritance, because इसमें का जो भी data है, because of this inheritance, it has been derived into this class. That is why I'll be able to use this. So I have a base class over here. I have a derived class over here. Then what I do now is I'm now going to create an object of class derived class. This one, D is equal to derived class. This is my object of derived class. When I write D dot read, this method is actually calling this read method, right? अब आप बोलोगे, अरे D is an object of class derived class. How can it invoke the method belonging to the base class? एक class का object कभी दूसरे class के method को invoke नहीं कर सकता है. This is possible only because of inheritance. So it is as good as this derived class. If I have to draw this derived class, I will say it has three methods. एक है read one, एक है display, जो कि आपने इसमें लिखा हुआ है. और apart from this, derived class जो है, because you've derived it from base class, इसका जो read method है, वो भी inherit होके इधर आ गया. तो इस तरीके से आपका read method call होगा. When I write this, your read one method is getting invoked. When I call this, your display one method will then get invoked. This is how it is working. So this is how inheritance works. Is this fine? Right? Now, observe this. I'll take this program over here. I think I'll take this as well. Now observe this. Now we'll be making a lot of changes here. Just observe this carefully. As of now, I'll just run this program the way we've written. तो हमने एक base class बनाया है, हमने एक derived class बनाया है, and उसके बाद using the object of the derived class, I'm calling the data belonging to the base class, right? Now when I run this program, it is asking me enter name. Suppose name is Ajay, age is say 20, address is say Mumbai. And now when I go, it is displaying this. Okay. Now observe, all I'm doing is, I'm just removing this base class. See, if I delete this, दोनों class के बीच में जो connection था ना, वो मैंने खत्म कर दिया. Now base class is an independent class and derived class is an independent class. I'm not changing here. D is an object of derived class and it is going to call this method read, or it is trying to call this method read, which does not exist in derived class ka code. It exists in the base class ka code. Now when I run this, See, it is giving me an error. It says derived class object has no attribute read. So it is giving me an error over here. मेरे को बोलता है कि D जो object है class derived का, it cannot call this read method because there does not exist a read method. So जो base class का data था वो अब derived class में आया ही नहीं because मैंने connection खत्म कर दिया है उसमें से. So if I want to use base class ka data over here, I will have to create this connection using inheritance over here. Only then it is going to work fine. Now observe this. Now what I do is I'll add one more class, right? I call this as say I'll now name this as derived class 1 and I'll call this as derived class 2. Observe, even derived class 2 I'm going to invoke derived class 2 I'm going to inherit from the base class. Okay. Now over here suppose I want to read say designation, right, and then print enter designation and then I'll write self dot designation, right? Okay. Now if you see I have a method say read to. Now D is an object of class derived class 1. Now what I'll also do is observe, I'll also create another object, or let me just create it as say D tha. This is D1 is an object of class derived class 2. Now if you see this is hierarchical inheritance. I've created one base class called base class. I've created class derived class 1, right, which apart from name and age wants address, and derived class 2 which apart from name and age also wants the designation. Okay, this is what I've done. So if you see this read method actually belongs to the base class. I've called it using the object of the base class, and I've also called I've called it using the object of derived class 1, and the same method I'm also calling using object of derived class 2. Now observe this, how I'll reuse the data over here. Now when I run this program, पहले आप देखिए वो D के लिए चलेगा, बाद में D1 के लिए चलेगा, और in other words पहले derived class 1 के लिए चलेगा, बाद में derived class 2 के लिए चलेगा. When I run this code, first it's asking me for name, say Ajay, age is 20, and say Mumbai, right? Yeah, right? It has read for this one. Now it goes ahead. It has displayed this क्योंकि अपन ने d dot display लिखा है. It's again asking me. It is again asking me name. Now suppose name is Sheetal, age is say 25. Derived class 2 has no object. Read 1. Now observe this over here, derived class 2, I've called this method called read1 from the object of derived class 2. ना derived class 2 में read1 है, ना उसके base class में read1 है. I'm trying to call किसी दूसरे derived class का method. No, this is not allowed. I can call either read or I can either call read2 over here. This is how you will be accessing the data belonging to the derived base class using multiple derived classes. Now, if I run this quickly, enter name. This is Ajay, say Ajay, age is 20, address is Mumbai. Display the information for the first derived class. Enter name. This is Sheetal. This is 25. And now if you see, यहाँ पर उसने अपने से क्या पूछा? Designation पूछा. They did not ask the address. because over here I'm invoking the method belonging to the derived class. So आप देखिए ये दोनों derived classes ने अपना जो independent data है वो तो use किया ही, but जो common data है वो base class में से use किया. So I'm using these methods. I'm using name, age, and read from the base class. I've used it in two different classes without rewriting this particular code, and this is what we do in inheritance. One last time, what is inheritance? Base class बनाने का, derived class बनाने का, use the object of the derived class to access the data belonging to the base as well as the derived class. Advantage is reusability of code, right? You'll type this quickly, get the outputs, and then we continue. Okay, so what we've seen is that we create a base class and then we create a derived class. Basically, this is what we just did. What we did is we just created a base class. Then from this base class, we created this derived class. So this base class ka method was also getting invoked, was also getting inherited in the derived class. तो अगर ये अपनी base class थी जिसमें एक method था और इसमें दो methods थे, तो because of inheritance, if I connect the two classes, because of inheritance, your base class ka method or data also becomes a member of your derived class ka method. Will also become member of your derived class. Now, similarly, you have something called as hierarchical inheritance. Hierarchical inheritance में क्या होता है? अगर आपके पास एक base class है जिसमें read method है. Now, in the first derived class, I've written, say, suppose read1 and display1. In the second derived class, say, I've written read2 and display2. Now, if I use inheritance and if I derive both these classes, derived class 1 and derived class 2 from the base class, then this read method gets inherited here as well. Then this read method inherits here as well. अब बाद में अगर मैं derived class 1 का ऑब्जेक्ट बनाता हूँ D1, तो वो इन तीनों मेथड्स को कॉल कर सकेगा. अगर मैं इसका ऑब्जेक्ट बनाता हूँ D2, तो वो इसके मेथड्स को कॉल कर सकेगा. So this is how we can implement hierarchical inheritance. Now इसी का implementation ये यहाँ पर दिया गया है. If you see this program, I have this base class which is reading what? Name and age. I have derived class 1 which adds address to it, and it displays name, age, and address. Then I have derived class 2 where we've added profession. So this class is reading address as additional information. This class is reading profession as an additional information. Over here, the read2 method, what it will do is it will read the profession, and display method will display name, age, and profession. So over here, name and age is common to both the classes because this comes from the base class. इसमें additional information was address. इसमें additional information is profession. Now, I create an object of class, derived class D1. So D1 dot read base class ka data, read1, display1. So basically, when I create object of this class, I can call these methods, read, read1, and display1. If I create an object of this class, I'll be able to call read, read2, and display. And that is what we've done. Read, read1, display, read, read2, and display. Read and display base class के methods हैं, उसको derived class 1 भी use कर रहा है और उसको derived class 2 भी use कर रहा है. This is how it works. So this is what is your hierarchical inheritance. Again, do not complicate stuff. Keep things simple. Simple as in what you need to do is create a base class, 2, create a derived class, 3, using the base and the derived class, using the objects of the derived class, you invoke all the methods belonging to the base and the derived class, right? Not more than 5 minutes. Whatever program you've just typed, you can just add one more class to it and just for once try hierarchical inheritance as well. Okay. Now you have this program in front of you. You're not typing this, just look at it carefully, analyze it, and try and figure out what the output is. Don't reveal the answer, just analyze this program carefully and figure out what the output is, and then I'll discuss the solution. So now we've just drawn what class A contains and what class B contains, right? Now, lowercase a is an object of class A. तो ये इसका object हुआ. लोअर केस b इज एन ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ क्लास b. ठीक है, ये ऐसा है, इतना मेरी समझ में आ गया. नाउ आई हैव टू प्रिंट स्टेटमेंट्स. Now my first print statement is a dot f. Now look at this very carefully. बहुत सिंपल सी चीज है, बट एक बहुत बेसिक पॉइंट है जो अपने को यहां पर समझ में आना चाहिए. And what is it? Observe. Look at this. Now over here, going to this print statement, first is a dot f. So using this a, what I'm doing is I'm calling this f function, ये वाला. Now when I call this f function, ये f function यहां से ये g को कॉल करता है, इसलिए मैं फर्स्ट आउटपुट इज a. समझा? a डॉट f, मैंने ये f फंक्शन को कॉल किया और ये f फंक्शन ने सामने g फंक्शन को कॉल किया, which is returning a. That is why I have displayed a over here. This is what has been done. ठीक है? Okay. So ये आपका पहला a तो आ गया. I guess most of you could figure this out. No big deal. Right? Now, then we have written b dot f. ठीक है? Now observe this, b इसका ऑब्जेक्ट है, ये इसको कॉल कर रहा है b डॉट f. Now if you see, f जो फंक्शन है एक्चुअली अपने कोड में से g को कॉल करता है. देखिए जैसे यहां पर उसने जब g को कॉल किया तो ये g कॉल हुआ और ये a आ गया. But understand, if you look at the code of this f function, just look at the code carefully. Now this is where your understanding of object-oriented concepts is needed. Now see this. यहां से f में से when I'm calling g, I'm calling self.g. इसका मतलब क्या है कि f जो भी क्लास में है उसका g. See, पहले because यहां पर this f was inside class A, वो class A के g मेथड को कॉल कर रहा था. यहां पर because now it is in class B, ये क्या करेगा? क्लास B के g मेथड को कॉल करेगा. It will not call that दूसरा वाला A method. That is why my second output would be this one. My second output would be this. ठीक है? Now, third one, a dot g. अब ये जब a जो g को कॉल करेगा, इसके सामने तो एक ही g फंक्शन है, तो वो क्या करेगा? वो यहां पर ये a डिस्प्ले कर देगा. When I write b dot g, तो b क्या करेगा? b के सामने दो g मेथड्स है. Now just observe this. ये कॉन्सेप्ट अभी हम और डिटेल में देखने वाले हैं, बट जस्ट अंडरस्टैंड दिस प्रॉपर्ली. अब एक्चुअली देखा जाए तो ये जो b ऑब्जेक्ट है, इसको जब g मेथड को कॉल करना है तो उसके सामने दो g मेथड्स है. कौन से दो g मेथड्स है? एक जो रेड में आपको यहां पर दिख रहा है, जो उसके अपने क्लास का मेथड है, ये वाला. और दूसरा जो है वो ये ग्रीन वाला जी है, जो ए में से इनहेरिट होके आया हुआ है. अब ये ऑब्जेक्ट बी जो है, इट हैज टू चूज बिटवीन दीज टू मेथड्स. इट हैज टू चूज बिटवीन द मेथड व्हिच हैज बीन डिफाइंड इन इट्स ओन क्लास एंड द मेथड व्हिच हैज बीन इनहेरिटेड. जब भी किसी भी ऑब्जेक्ट को अपने खुद के मेथड और इनहेरिट होके आए हुए मेथड में से सिलेक्ट करना है, वो हमेशा अपने खुद के मेथड को ही कॉल करेगा. एंड दिस इज कॉल्ड एज मेथड ओवरराइडिंग इन प्रोग्रामिंग. ठीक है? नाउ व्हाट इज मेथड ओवरराइडिंग? आई विल एलैबोरेट ऑन दैट. एज ऑफ नाउ दिस b will call this g method and my output would be b. My output would be ab. ठीक है? Right? So that is what is the output of this particular program. So this is the output, and this now also brings to a very, very, very important concept for us in object-oriented programming, which is method overriding. Now please understand this properly. What exactly is method overriding and why is it so important that we understand method overriding and try and implement some solution to it. Now observe this please. Method overriding क्या होता है? Keep things very simple over here please. Now see, suppose, please बहुत ध्यान से देखना. I have this class A. ये क्लास के अंदर आई हैव रिटन वन फंक्शन रीड, उसका कुछ तो कोड है, एंड आई हैव रिटन अनदर फंक्शन कॉल्ड डिस्प्ले, उसका भी कुछ तो कोड है. Then what I do is, suppose I have another class called B. In this class, I have written a method called compute, suppose. Okay? And I have also written a method called display. Right? Now what happens is, till these classes are independent, we don't have any issue. मतलब क्या हुआ? मतलब ये है that if I create an object, say X, for this class A, I can write x dot read and x dot display. हर object अपने class के कोई भी method को call कर सकता है. Now, if I create an object Y of this class B, I can write y dot compute and y dot display. ये object भी अपने class के data को access कर सकता है. Now, what happens is, suppose now if I derive this class B from A, मैंने inheritance implement कर दिया. So what I do is, जो भी base class के methods हैं, वो भी derived class में आ गए. So ऊपर class A में से read नाम का function इधर आ गया inherit होके, और ऊपर वाला जो display function है, वो भी इधर आ गया inherit होके. So actually now, if you see class B, ये वाला class, in this class, I have two methods with the same name display. अभी तक कैसा होता था, आपके क्लास में हर नाम का एक ही मेथड होता था. यहां पर यू हैव अ क्लास व्हिच हैज टू मेथड्स विद द सेम नेम डिस्प्ले. Now suppose this display is displaying say M, and this display is displaying say N. So effectively there are two different display methods. Now what happens over here is, now if I write a statement like y dot display, see, understand, by writing this, I'm asking my object y to invoke this method called display. मैं object y को बोल रहा हूं कि display method को call करो. Now the problem is that this method y, now when it enters this class like this, it enters this class to call this display function, तो उसको दो display function दिखेंगे, और अब वो confuse हो जाएगा कि कौन सा वाला display function call किया जाए. So understand what is the problem. I have a base class and I have a derived class. I have methods with the same name display in both the base and the derived class. And hence, because of inheritance, the derived class now has two methods with the same name. I have two methods with the name display. They are two different methods, लेकिन नाम दोनों का same हो गया. Now, if using this object y, if I'm trying to call this display method, the issue is which is the display method that I need to call. अब as an object y, you understand my thought process. आप मेरी सोच समझिए. As an object y, I'm now confused कि मेरे सामने दो display method है, मैं किसको call करूं? लेकिन मेरे सामने जो दो display method है, one is this display method belongs to class B, and this display method has been inherited from class A. So I am an object y, I am an object of class B. तो मेरे सामने जो दो methods है, उसमें एक method मेरे अपने class का है, class B का है, और एक method है जो class A में से inherit होके आया हुआ है. मेरे को दोनों में से एक को call करना है. So this object y now has to choose between its own method, or the method belonging to its own class, and the method which has been derived from the base class. Now कभी भी अगर एक ऑब्जेक्ट को अपने खुद के मेथड और इनहेरिट करके आए हुए मेथड में से सिलेक्ट करना है, तो वो हमेशा खुद के ही मेथड को कॉल करेगा और डिराइव्ड क्लास के मेथड को कॉल होने नहीं देगा. दैट इज व्हाट इज मेथड ओवरराइडिंग. सो व्हाट दिस y will say is, this display method belongs to my own class. I will call this display method, and I will not call the method belonging to the base class. So if this display was displaying M, it will display M as the output. This is method overriding. So what is method overriding? If the base and the derived classes have methods with the same name, then whenever we use a derived class ka object to call the method, it will always call only derived class ka method, and it will not call the base class ka method. And that is what is method overriding in programming. Now, I'll demonstrate this with the help of this program. Just look at this carefully. Now, I've created a base class here, which has two variables, name, which is a string, and age. एक read method मैंने लिखा है, which is reading name and age. इतना read कर रहा है. Then I have another derived class. Now look at this carefully. Now this derived class has another variable, which is address. Okay. This derived class is derived from this base class. So everything that I have in the base class is now part of the derived class. Now derived class में भी मैंने एक method लिख दिया है read करके, और display नाम का जो method है वो तो है ही. अब अगर आप यहां देखेंगे, लुक एट दिस डिराइव क्लास, ये डिराइव क्लास में उसका अपना खुद का भी एक रीड मेथड है, एंड आई हैव डिराइव्ड इट फ्रॉम अ क्लास जिसके अंदर भी एक रीड मेथड है. तो एक्चुअली देखा जाए तो दिस डिराइव क्लास दैट आई हैव ओवर हियर एक्चुअली नाउ हैज टू रीड मेथड्स, एक जो बेस क्लास का है और एक उसका अपना खुद का. एनीवेज, what I now do is I create an object d1 of the derived class, and now I'm writing d.read. Now आप ये चीज समझिए, यहां पर हो क्या रहा है. यहां पर मेरे पास एक बेस क्लास है जिसमें एक रीड मेथड है, जिसमें मैंने क्या किया है, नेम और एज रीड किया है. अब मैंने एक डिराइव क्लास बनाई है, इसमें एक रीड मेथड है. ये रीड मेथड में से आई एम रीडिंग व्हाट, एड्रेस. बट बिकॉज ऑफ इनहेरिटेंस ये ऊपर वाला रीड मेथड भी इनहेरिट होके इधर आ गया. इसके अंदर आई हैव नेम एंड इसके अंदर आई हैव एज. Now what I'm doing in my program is I'm creating an object of this class D. This is my derived class. I've created this object D, and now when I write D.read, observe what has happened. My derived class now have two read methods with the same name. This is overriding. Now when D has to call a read method, it has to choose between these two read methods. उसके सामने एक method है जो उसका अपना मेथड है, ये वाला, और ये मेथड है जो कि इनहेरिट होके आया हुआ है. नाउ दिस d.read विल गो अहेड एंड कॉल उसका अपना फंक्शन. इट विल नॉट ट्राई टू कॉल द मेथड बिलोंगिंग टू द बेस क्लास. सो दिस इज ओवरराइडिंग. Now observe what happens in my code when I run this program. Observe. See, उसने सीधा address मांगा. It did not ask for name and age. Why did it not do it? क्योंकि उसने derive class के method को call किया और उसके बाद मेरा प्रोग्राम खत्म हो गया. इफ यू सी, नेम एंड एज में कुछ आया ही नहीं, जो मैंने इनिशियलाइज करके छोड़ा था वही है. दिस इज बिकॉज दिस फंक्शन डिड नॉट, और दिस मेथड डिड नॉट गेट इन्वोक्ड. व्हाई डिड इट नॉट गेट इन्वोक्ड? बिकॉज ऑफ overriding. Is this understood? So one last time, what is overriding? If the base and the derived class methods, if the base and the derived classes have methods with the same name, then whenever I use a derived class object for invoking the method, the derived class method will get invoked and the base class method will not be allowed to call. And this is what is method overriding. Is this understood? Now, method overriding actually is a pretty serious problem in object-oriented programming, and every language tries to implement a solution to it. Now, understand, why is this a problem, or why do we treat method overriding as a problem? Observe this. See, ये मेरा base class है, right? And ये मेरा derived class है. See, the whole idea of inheritance is that I want to be able to use base class का data inside derived class. वो reusability of code के लिए तो हमने inheritance बनाया है. The whole idea is reusability of code. But now what's happened is I have a read method here, right, which is name and age. I have another read method here, which is address. Okay. Now, because I have used inheritance, what has happened is even the base class ka read method is here. name and age. ठीक है. Then what we did is we created an object of derived class, say D, and whenever I'm calling now read method, it is calling this read method only. There is no chance that I'll be able to call the base class का read method. यानी मैं base class का जो भी data है उसको derived class में use नहीं कर पा रहा हूं. If I cannot reuse the data belonging to the base class in the derived class, the whole purpose of using inheritance is lost, na? The whole idea of inheritance is negated because of overriding, because now I'm not in a position to access the base class ka data into this derived class. So what do? I need to implement this solution, else koi matlab hi nahi reh gaya inheritance ka. So the solution that I'm looking for is that even though my derived class has two methods with the same name, I should be able to invoke both. Matlab, in spite of the same name, I should be able to read name, I should be able to read age, and I should be able to read address. So I should be able to access the code belonging to both the methods. So how do I do it? As of now, what you've seen is when I go to this program or when I'm running this program, when I run this program, what happens is it is reading only the address. Name or age read nahi kar raha hai. तो मैं क्या करूंगा? Now for this problem of overriding, we have the solution in the form of a super function. I'm just going to add one line to this code and all should be good. Now observe this. मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ? मैं derived class के read में I'm writing this function called super. मैंने इतना ही किया. Just one line I've added over here. And now see what happens. Now when I run this program, it is still asking me the just the address. So I now need to figure out how this needs to be done. Now what you need to do is, just a sec. Just type this program, you will see an output like this, and then we'll discuss what exactly super function is all about. Just implement method overriding. One more time, what exactly is method overriding? If the base and the derived classes have methods with the same name, then whenever I use the object belonging to the derived class for invoking the method, it will always invoke the method belonging to the derived class only, and it will not let us invoke the method belonging to the base class. This is method overriding in object-oriented programming. Just type this, get the output, and then we'll make changes to this program. So here I now need to figure out a solution about how to invoke the base class methods. Now, yahan par ho ye raha hai, when I'm running this particular program, the system is always invoking only the derived class method. When I run this program, it is asking only for address and rest of the data is not being read. So that is the problem. So what I now do is I'll just add one thing. Now observe this. In this read method, which belongs to the derived class, I'll write something like this: super.read. Now what exactly is this super function? See, the word super function, actually the word super comes from the word super class. So what we've been calling as base class and derived class, this is super class and subclass. Now if in a derived class, if I use this function super, it refers to its base class, right? So when I write super.read, it effectively means base class ka read method. Now when I run this program, now it is asking me for the name. Now it is asking me for the age. Say then it is asking me for address, and now I'll get my idea. Now this is how it will work. All I need to do is add this one line, super.read. So super, when used in a derived class, will always refer to the base class. So what I've done is it's exactly the same program. I've just added one line. Now what is happening here? See, observe. Now D1 is an object of this derived class. So when I write D1.read, ये actually क्या करता है? Because of overriding, ये अपने क्लास के read method को call करेगा. But within this read method, I've written super.read. So this derived class is derived from this base class. तो वो base class के read method को call करेगा इधर. वो इधर जाएगा. It will first read the name. It will then read the age. It will then, after executing this, come back and continue with this particular code. So what I can do is I can actually read the data belonging to the base class and the derived class using the keyword super. So this to an extent solves the problem of method overriding. अब आप देखिए मेरे ये प्रोग्राम में बेस और डिराइव क्लास में सेम नाम के मेथड्स हैं, मतलब ओवरराइडिंग हो रहा है, but I'm still able to access the data like this. So that is what is method overriding. So this is method overriding, and also this is the end of this part of object-oriented programming for us. You can just add this key super function and hopefully the program should work fine, right? Just complete this, and this also ends inheritance for us.